about the trends that are happening in the world, and we think of life from a mind, body, and spirit perspective, because that's what servant leaders do. So join me. Well, hello, friends. This is Mike Rochelle. I'm here with Dr. Alise Cortez, one of my oldest friends here in Dallas, on growing the next version of you. And Alise, growing the next version of you is kind of my way of responding to all of the madness that happened during the COVID time, when everybody was hating each other and not being able to have a conversation. So the work that you and I have done with Crucial Conversations is very much centered in the concept of this show, because what I'm trying to do is to bring dialogue back into the mainstream, right? Because if you can sit down with somebody that you disagree with and you can passionately position why you believe a certain thing, and they can passionately, you can then grow together. You can understand each other in a way that you couldn't before. And then, as it says in Crucial Conversations, and then figure out what the path forward is so that you can work together to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve together.
Powerful.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, it's powerful.
So that was kind of behind it. So how have you been doing, and what are you up to these days?
Oh my gosh, there's something fantastic about living your purpose. It's pretty amazing. It's the best vitamin I've ever taken in my life.
Yeah.
I think I'll stick with the regime. So what I've been doing really, and this is kind of surprising to me, even over the last 3.5 years, I have written and published 4 books.
Right.
I have really developed my cultural transformation methodology and been practicing that in organizations, and then refining my Vitally Inspired Leadership program and the Managing Through Meaning Manager program. That's really what I've been doing. Continue to host the Working at Purpose radio show. That's my catalyzing engine that keeps me growing.
Where can people find that?
Oh gosh, anywhere you get a podcast, you can probably find it by just typing in Working on Purpose Radio, Alise Cortez. It's on Apple, iTunes, iHeart, older versions on Voice America. I have a YouTube channel called Working on Purpose Radio. Lots of places to find it. So that's a kind of a nice recap of what I'm doing today.
Okay, very good. So what growing the next version of you is about is really about you. So I want from a mind, body, and spirit perspective for us to have the beginning conversation. We're a little pressed for time today, so we're only going to have about 40 minutes. Typically, I do 1 hour to 2 hour shows, so we'll have at least another hour to go into something deeper. But what I want to start out with, just who made or what made you you? Where did you come from? What is your basis for understanding from a mind, body, and spirit perspective?
Wow, that's just one heck of a cue up.
That's all.
Okay. So first, I think it's always important to start by saying that I am the product of a family wherein my mother was married 5 times by the time she was 28 years old, and I was in 2nd grade. So I already cycled through 4 father figures by the time I was in 2nd grade.
Okay.
And what's interesting about that is, so if you look at the way that I was raised, so that's the environmental influence. My mother, of course, was the biological piece, but my father was my stepfather. But he really did ushering us into that world. What happened was, it was like a fairy tale. He was a knight in shining armor. My mother had been working 3 jobs up until that point in restaurants and bars. And he had a 600-acre farm in central Washington state.
Wow.
And he was gallant. He was giving and kind and generous. It just gave us this place that we had stability for the first time in our lives.
Wow.
And that really set the stage, I think, for the rest of my life. And then really what I would say is, and this is critical for who I am today, on that farm, a farmer works 7 days a week. He gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning to change the pipes, etc., the sprinklers. And there is a work ethic that is built into that. It's the fabric of life. And I grew up around that. I had responsibilities as well. And then when I was in 7th grade, they moved to Oregon and got into the restaurant business. That's another heavy work ethic business to be in. And I began working for my parents in the restaurant when I was 13. So what's important about what makes me me today from that experience is I grew up anchored in work, and not as work as a bad 4-letter word, but work is the way of life.
Sure.
And this is how we spend our time and our service to other human beings. And that is totally situated who I am today, wherein what I'm out to do, what my purpose is today is to be able to help create workplaces where people are enlivened, they work and reach their potential. They're led by inspirational leaders who lead them to their greatness in organizations that are bettering the world. And that's all anchored in the notion that work is beautiful and it's a way of serving other people. Totally came from my earlier upbringing.
Nice.
So that's the beginning.
Okay. So then as you progressed then, you went to school somewhere. Where did you go and what was your experience there?
Okay, so we have to talk about how I was launched into the whole study realm. This is really critical. So when I was in kindergarten in Yakima, Washington, back then my mother was probably in between her 3rd and 4th husband. I'm not sure, I can't remember, but anyway, I had a habit of daydreaming in school. And I remember distinctly one day in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher said to me in front of everyone, "You are the stupidest kid I've ever had in all the years I've been teaching." And I thought about that, and I wasn't diminished by that. That didn't make me into a small pile of a person. I just believed her. So what that meant was, from there forward, whenever I got an assignment, I would get the assignment and I would lay it all out in front of me, and I'd say, "Okay, now I am stupid, so I'm going to have to work at this harder than the other kids." And so I'd lay out this really strong system for studying, and I developed this over the top way of studying and preparing for my coursework and for my tests. And guess what happened? Over all of the elementary, middle, and high school years, I got almost straight A's. But I still kept believing that I was stupid. So that's what powered me to keep studying so strong. It wasn't until I was in high school that I started to have the idea that maybe she was wrong. And that's okay. That's okay. But so I didn't actually.
So the bad thing that she did actually provided you with some motivation to become something that you already probably were, but even more focused.
I was, and that's going to let me, that already were part speaks to the biology piece, which I want to get to in just a little bit here.
Okay.
But when I first got out of high school, I didn't aspire to go to college because my parents were entrepreneurs, restaurateurs. College was something that prevented you from going out in the world to make money.
To do things.
Right. So I spent about 8 months going to business college. But the key thing was when I was in small town Hermiston, Oregon, when I graduated high school, it was population 4,800. I had been waiting tables for my parents a little over 4 years. I had one aspiration, and that was to get out of Dodge. I did not want to stay in that small town. So I had a co-op job my senior year of high school working as a receptionist for this pumping company. Ended up meeting the owner of the company who lived in Portland. And he was impressed with my work, and he said to me these magic words. He said, "If you ever want a job, you can find one with me in Portland." There it was. That was my ticket out of that. It was ding, 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 ding. I will take you up on that. So I graduated high school. I moved to Portland, the big exotic city of Portland. And I did about 8 months of business college, studied accounting and that kind of a thing, bookkeeping. And then I promptly went to work for Roland as his receptionist. So I worked for him for some time, and there's a story behind that that's really cool. But I didn't find my way into college until I was 24 years old. And that's when I went to a community college and studied communications, Portland Community College. And then when I got through with that, I was dating someone who I met in the restaurant that I was waiting tables at while I was in school. He had a big job with ARCO. And he said to me, a month into our dating, he said, "They're going to transfer me to Madrid." And I said, "Wow, that's great. You're going to do fantastic. Good luck." He said, "No. I think you should come with me." So I did. I knew him for a total of 4 months when in April of 1991, I moved to Madrid. And once I got there, he was a Jewish man from Chicago. He said, "We must continue your education." And I was like, "Is that possible?" I thought, am I going to go to a university in Madrid? And we found all these distance programs. So I found the University of Iowa, where they offered a Bachelor's of Liberal Studies by distance.
Hmm.
So I signed up for that, and that's how I began my studies, or continued my studies. So what was great was I agreed to go to Madrid because I thought that his job was going to be our job. I
Hmm.
didn't understand that, this thing about visas and things like that, but I didn't have one. So that's why he said, you got to go and study. So what would happen was he would go to the office, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And he goes, well, you're going to study. And I said, well, I'm going to get a URL pass. So what I would do is I got the URL pass, took my studies and my books with me and all my assignments, and I would write my papers on the train.
Hmm.
And then when I got off the train, I'd stop into whatever city I was in, Paris or whatever, Amsterdam, and I would fax my paper into the University of Iowa, into the professor. And what I didn't know, on the other end of that fax machine, they were like, who is this Alise Taylor person who's sending things in from Sweden and from Norway
Oh
and from
yeah.
Italy? And who is this? I didn't know it, but on the other end of the fax machine at the University of Iowa, I was becoming quite famous. So
She's the exotic
so
student.
yeah, so I
Well,
was
you were doing remote work, but when nobody else
what
was
I
doing
mean,
it.
I was ahead of the game. So we were there for 6 months. I went all over Western Europe. I learned French in my first 2 years of college, so I could speak French well. Learned Spanish working in the restaurant, so I could get by and built on my Spanish. And then 6 months in, he said, they're going to move me to Rio de Janeiro. And I said, that's great. I'm going to get off the bus now. This is your gig. I'm going to go back to Portland. And he said, I'll do anything to make you stay. Okay, so we moved to Rio de Janeiro. So now I've got Portuguese, and I'm 26 years old, and I end up with a live-in maid, a chauffeur, and a gardener. Still no visa, so I continue the studies. We go all over South America, and I continue and finish my bachelor's with the University of Iowa. The next day, I start my master's with the University of Oklahoma, also in liberal studies. So that's where that was anchored. And for that organization, or for that degree, I did a focus on international relations with South America to formalize what I was learning by
Mhm.
living in
Mhm.
Rio and going all over South America.
Right.
And so for my thesis, I had the amazing fortune of attending the 1992 Rio Earth Summit when I was
Hmm.
living in Rio. And I was blown away. I'm from Oregon, so we already care about the environment. I saw people from all over the world coming into Rio, leaders from all over the world caring about climate change and sustainability, et cetera. So I wrote my thesis for my master's on um, the economic, social, and political factors that were impacting Amazonian deforestation. That's what my thesis is on.
Hmm.
And I graduated. I actually moved from Rio. I left the relationship and I moved back to Portland. Ended up finishing that degree after I reintegrated back into work in the United States. So those are those degrees. Where do you want me to go next?
Well, so let's go back to that statement that your elementary teacher told you. So by this time, you've already figured out that you're not stupid, and you're doing some pretty significant work all by yourself, basically just reading and writing papers,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I I just feel compelled to say, when people are talking with other people, you have to be careful with words that you use, because I too have memories of things that people told me when I was younger
Mm-hmm.
that I still deal with now, right? Because of the harm that provided. Now I'm not damaged completely by it, right?
Right.
You understand what I'm
Right.
saying?
Certainly.
But the point is that you have to watch your words, because there's energy in words. Sometimes it can be a motivation. So in my case, for both of those individuals that said something to me, it was a motivator for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
But um, but it's a negative energy, right? And it's something that
Titles travel.
exactly. So, but you had already figured out that you're not stupid at this point, right?
Yes, but where it gets really, really interesting, back on, I mentioned the environmental piece when husband number 5, my dad, came into my life when I was in second grade. The environmental impact from his work ethic and
Mm,
was so strong.
mm,
But where it gets interesting from a biological perspective is, if I look back, so my mother was married those 5 times. She had 4 children, all with different fathers.
wow.
So, but I was the only one that seemed to really thrive in school. I was the only one who didn't smoke. I was the only one that really went after the college sort of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward in life, I then meet my biological father, who I'd only met briefly when I was 28 years old, didn't have a relationship with, but met him when both my parents passed in 2019. So I meet him, and I come to understand, Mike, that here is a man who has been vigorously studying the Bible and writing scholarly articles on it for 25 years.
Really?
And I went, and when he told me that, I went, the record stopped, right? And I went, oh, that's where I get it from. This isn't me.
Mm-hmm.
This is my father gave this to me.
Mm-hmm.
What I have to study and write is a need.
Right.
It is an imperative. I'm governed by this thing, right? That's why I continue hosting the radio show, because I do it in a way that I devour a book every week in preparation for it.
Sure.
So, but what I realized is my father passed on that genetic code to be intellectual, to be studious, to be curious, the need every day. He does this every day. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, wow, where to go? So there are a couple of the things that you just shared that I knew, but most of it I didn't. So people are amazing, and that's the beautiful thing.
Life is amazing.
It is indeed. Let's go to the spiritual side for the next 20 minutes or so, and just talk a little bit about one of the things that as we were prepping, and we didn't do a lot of prep. I do that on purpose,
right?
Because I want the conversation
organic.
To be
organic. You bet.
Exactly. But I want to talk about something where we have a little bit of a difference on purpose, so that we can see what we understand about each other, and then see how we move forward together with that as well.
Sounds good.
So one of the things that you said that I think would be a good, or you said would be a good thing, and I agree with it, is that I have a spirituality that is based in Christianity. Now, we'll talk about that too, because I've opened up to other places as well probably in the 20 years since you and I have talked about this in detail.
Okay.
But you do not have a Christian faith, but you do have a spirituality. So can you define what your spirituality is, and then let's see where we go in that conversation.
Can, and I want to sort of define that, and then I want to
Yeah.
give it an anchoring experience that probably
Okay.
launched it.
Okay.
So for me, spirituality really speaks more to coming to understand who you are and your place in the universe more through experience than the dogma of a religion that
Sure.
that tells you this is you've studied the history of a religion and you've subscribed to its principles.
Right.
So what's pretty interesting from my vantage point of my own path is I had an epiphany when I was about 6 years old. And it happened when my mother was married to husband number 4. We were in Yakima, Washington. We lived in this big, huge 2-story house, and this was a really rough time. This was a man who was 6'8" old, 6'8" inches, and he used to beat the heck out of all of us. It was a really tough time. This was not a good pick when it comes to husbands. And that was really a traumatic time for me. But I remember distinctly being outside this house. It had to be fall because all of the leaves outside the tree were off the tree. And it was a brilliant blue sky. And I was outside by myself. And I suddenly got this experience, like it was like something beamed to me that helped me, that opened a space that communicated not with words. You're okay. You're part of something much bigger. This is all going to be fine. And that has never left me. An epiphany, right? It speaks to that you go right back to that, and the image, the experience is pure.
Sure.
So I was anchored in that. I had that experience, and then fast forward when my mother meets husband number 5, he is a Catholic. I did go to some church with him, did a little bit of Sunday school stuff, but it just never made sense to me. It just didn't. I just really couldn't connect with, and didn't want to try to connect with, the principles. And my mother said, I'm not going to put you into any kind of religion. She says, I think that's for you to choose. It's not for me to implore in you or prescribe. It is for you to discover on your own. So what was interesting is when I graduated high school and moved to Portland, I went looking and tried to attend different churches. Oh, this is important. when I was in high school, I did actually have the idea, you're going to laugh, I did actually have the idea for about a hot minute that I was going to become a nun.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, and because I knew that there was something in me that, you know, wanted, and I was searching, and I
Yeah.
wanted that connection with something, you know, the bigger whole.
Mm.
My friends, though, quickly disabused me of that idea. They said, no, you cannot become a nun because you will be the only one in the lineup of nuns with a slit up your skirt. Not going to work. It's not going to work.
The style just
Go
doesn't
on
work.
to something else. But when I did move to Portland, I went looking and attended various different churches because what I was looking for from the priest, the pastor, whatever it was, wisdom.
Mm.
I wanted to, I was hoping that they could impart wisdom to me.
Mhm.
And so often I was very disappointed by that. So then I just fell off the whole religion truck entirely
Mhm.
and didn't go to church or anything for years. And in fact, over time, became what I called myself an agnostic. And I was an agnostic when I met you
Right.
20 some years ago.
Yeah.
And of course, over time, what's happened, it started when I really began this meaning and work research heavily, the postdoc research especially. And I discovered that one of the modes I found was living your purpose. And I really, as I came to understand that, and I remember very once distinctly speaking for you in RLF, when I'd always had this self-actualization mode, somebody asked me what was my mode, and it fell out of my mouth before I could stop it. This would have been like 2017. I said I was living my purpose. And it really just brought me to tears that I realized that's where I was.
Right.
Well, in order for me to feel like I was living my purpose, I couldn't not feel that I was connected to something much bigger, that I wasn't connected
What
to
are your
something
top
more
5
important.
strengths?
Um, they are achiever, learner, significance, maximizer, and individualization.
Okay.
So over time, what's happened is that whole, and I call it unfolding, right? And this is a term that I learned from somebody else that's in this sort of a path, unfolding into myself,
Sure.
and just, you know, I would say letting the layers fall away
Right.
so that I could feel my connection to that greater being.
Sure.
I could recognize that I am here specifically, uniquely, beautifully created, and that I have work to do in the world that's uniquely mine, and that is an expression of my spirituality
Yeah.
and my
So,
purpose.
so the interesting thing is, and I don't know that we've talked about this before, but I've had 3 or 4 what I call transcendental experiences like that
Mm.
in my life. 2 of them were based on physical exertion. So I went to Mount Whitney. I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis when I was in my mid-20s.
What is that?
It's a lung disease. It kind of functions like asthma, where asthma, when you have an asthmatic situation, your the bronchial tubes dilate, they close down, and you
Oh,
can't get oxygen in.
okay.
Sarcoidosis is you can get all the oxygen you want to, but your alveoli are hardening whenever it is in action,
Mm.
and you can breathe all the air you want, but the oxygen is not passing through the alveoli to get to the bloodstream.
Okay. Wow.
So it's sort of like choking, but you can breathe all as much as you want,
Wow.
right? So so there was a point where I couldn't walk around the block without having a deep breath, right? And I basically set a goal to go to top of Mount Whitney, and that was the goal, was the thing that was going to motivate me to continue to walk through that pain and figure out how to get rid of it, right? Wade Franson was my friend who introduced me to vitamins and all kinds of things, and really the change in lifestyle and the change in diet really helped me to overcome that. That was phase 1 of my health kick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I eventually got to the point where I could hike up to Mount Whitney, which was in Pasadena, very close. Mount, what was it? I can't think of the mountain now. It doesn't matter. Anyway, but I went to Whitney with my brother, and there was a guy that I knew, Paul Agnew at C.B. Richard Ellis, who had done it before. So we would do training things in the mountains around Los Angeles, which maxed out at about 8,000 to 10,000 feet in the Big Bear area.
Mm-hmm.
And we kept growing up to with a point where we could go up to Mount Whitney. And I went with my brother. I actually got my brother to come from Houston, just about killed him because flatlander trying to go up
Oh
this way.
yeah.
But we ended up at about 11,000 feet and the ice was still in the mountains. It was like in July or something, or June, July, August. Anyway, there's a very short period of time where you can actually go to the very top before the snow comes back again. And we couldn't make it. We couldn't do it because the ice was just treacherous and we could have died because you could fall down these things. So about 2 weeks later, I was by myself and I decide I'm going to go. So I go, I drive up there. I don't have a pass. I don't have a camping spot. I basically found a parking spot. I parked my BMW in the spot and I'm sleeping on the passenger side when I hear something and I look and frankly, I got out of the car to go to the bathroom, and on the other side of the car, a bear stands up. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm by myself. But fortunately, somebody had an extra pass, right? And they said, we're going to leave at 4 o'clock in the morning because you had to, it's 11 miles up and 11 miles down to 14,474 feet. Well, I started out with them, but they were walking really slow. So I decided I'm going to do this in one day. I'm not going to try to spend the night with no tent and all that stuff. So I kept on going. And I get to about 12 or 13,000 feet and I am just about to pass out because I can't breathe. Right. And this guy comes along and he puts his arm around me. He goes, all you have to do is make general pain or specific pain, general pain. You can do this. And he stayed with me and he was with me until I summited. And at the summit, I turned around to say thank you and he wasn't there.
Wow.
Now, and I told my brother this the other day, I don't know if he was an angel. And maybe he was with a group and he just walked over to the group and I was so out of it that I didn't know where he was. One way or the other, he was my angel that day because he helped me to the top.
No question.
Right. And that was a God moment, right, for me. Right. And that's the way I think about it. But it was very similar. And so in the last 20 years or so, I've been studying the mystics. So Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint John of the Cross, all of these people talked about experiential interaction with the being.
Yes.
That is very similar to the way that you described
and that's
it.
how,
right?
That's it.
So for me, I don't have any issue with what you are saying. I just believe that there's something there that is actually guiding that step and helping you to become that which you are.
So since then, over time, I have really come to believe that there is, there's an intelligence about the world that is governing this. I absolutely accept that. And I will tell you that part of the reason that got further evoked in me is by watching 12 times My Octopus Teacher. And so that is a documentary that really showcases a man who is somewhere in his probably early 50s, and he's had either some kind of he's burnt out or something in his career or something, and he's in South Africa. And he says, the only way I know to kind of work through this situation, I wasn't a good father then, wasn't a good husband. Let me go back to what I did when I was a kid and dive in the sea. And he does that, and he ends up meeting this octopus, and he befriends her. And over more than a year's time, he basically dives every day, and he comes to really understand how things are.
Sorry, it's a Amber Alert.
Yeah. So mine is doing this. So this man, he's diving in the ocean every single day. He meets this octopus. He sees her for over a year's time. They develop this relationship. And in that relationship, the exchange, what he comes to understand, and he says this so beautifully toward the end, is he says, she taught me that I'm not here visiting. I'm part of this world. And really it showcases just the perfect beauty of the underworld, the underground undersea forest, the kelp forest they call it. And it just really, you could just see how beautiful, the intelligent design behind all of this, and how all the species relate and connect, and just, the complexity and the beauty of all of it together, that just so furthered my awakening and understanding of just this beautiful place that we call home, this planet, this
Yeah.
universe.
Yeah.
And so I've really come to believe that I do believe that the universe is intelligently designed, intelligently governed, that there is order and purpose behind it. I can't imagine. We are brought into this world. We have a spirit. When we die, we drop the body, as Paul Skinner would say.
Hmm.
Our spirit goes on,
Hmm.
and it's evolved over time, and I'm sure it will continue to evolve.
Sure.
Where it's going to go, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I'm loving the process of just letting it unfold.
That's awesome. And I love this idea of unfolding. The peeling back the layers of the onion has been kind of a metaphor that I've used for the Christian walk, because as we understand things that we do that are not pleasant for other people, and we take that off, we become more of who we are and meant to be,
Hmm.
right, as a blessing to the world.
Hmm.
So I look forward to continuing this conversation. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful conversation. Just for time perspective, we're going to end it today right here. But I very much appreciate you going there with me. I look forward to the rest of the story the next time we get together. And folks, we'll see you next time too. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.